Hi everyone, let me know if you are here. Happy Thursday. Today we are talking about the physical environment, setting up the actual classroom with the actual furniture that you have, whatever it may be. I've got a couple organizational tips that I'm going to share with you while everybody comes in. One of which is the organization that I found most useful for visuals, which is, sorry, didn't really mean to turn my back on you there. I should have gotten this out beforehand. This is a jewelry holder. I got it at Amazon. Um, and one of the things I really like about this particular one is it's got different sizes. So it's got some bigger pockets and little pockets. I also like that it's on both sides. Comes with a hanger, so it's really easy to just hang on your wall. And so you can organize them, whether you're a macro organizer or a micro organizer. You can section them off whatever way you would like. But this is one of the most reliable methods that I have found for organizing my visuals. I've used sentence charts as well. Just make sure you have them Velcroed on your wall really well, because I've had them fall down in the middle of things. Interestingly enough, when your arms are tired and you're not ready to put all the visuals that you dumped into a bag, you can sort them out in muffin tins. However, I don't suggest this as a method for long-term storage, just because it's kind of bulky. Another one I'll share with you real quick before we get started. Let me know if you're here. Tell me what kind of class you're teaching this year. I would love to know where you're from and what you're teaching so I can know who I'm talking to. This is a strategy that I've found really useful over the years for a couple things. It's one of the Iris photo boxes. I've got a real glare on my camera here, so let's see if I back up if that helps. And it's a small first then board, so I just print it a little bit smaller. And so this one is, I write and then I can play basketball or pick out a new book. But then it's on the outside of this. I just Velcroed it so that you can open it up and you've got all your visuals stored in it. So it's an easy way to keep the things that you need where you need them. It's also a really useful thing to send home to families if they're going to use supports at home. So it's a good thing. It's a nice thing for a classroom, but it's also a really nice thing if you're on the go. So if you teach CBI, this is an easy way to keep a whole bunch of handy things together. And it's also a useful thing that I've used when I've made home visits and needed to leave something with families to use. Just because when you're on the go, it's hard to have the visuals right where you need them. And so this is a good way to kind of store them and put them together. So I just wanted to share those couple things as ways to help with that. All right. So if you're here, share with me who you are. I'd love to know who's around. Let me call up the post so I can see anybody who's not showing up in my chat. I'll call you up over here. Just in case I'm not getting you in the chat here. And today I want to talk about physical space and organizing all of our furniture and stuff like that. So I'm going to share some slides with you with some pictures. Janet, hi. It's good to see you. How is Oklahoma? Is it still really hot? Yeah, of course, nothing's going to actually load for me. There we go. Maureen, Sandy, awesome. Tara, high school, awesome. And Tara, I have got a secondary blog post that it's coming someday. I'm hoping in the next week before I go on vacation. From Iowa, awesome. And Maureen, 1 to 6 life skills, K4, awesome. From Arkansas, great. TA from North Carolina, love North Carolina. Lived there for a number of years. Cypress, Texas, autism only middle school, cool. And it is hot in Oklahoma. Here it's just raining, so my dog is not very happy. So if she suddenly pushes me away from the computer, I will apologize ahead of time. She likes to sit on the box underneath my feet when it's thundering. Yes, go high school teachers. Yeah, I have a secondary post that used to be on a blog that no longer exists. So I need to get it up on my blog with the schedule and the pictures, and I just have not had time to get to that, but I am trying to get to that as soon as I can. Okay, so let me share my screen. I want to share some pictures with you. Now I've got myself in my peripheral vision waving my hands around, so that's always fun. Let's see. I really just wanted to share my PowerPoint. Yes, show my PowerPoint. That would be nice. Show that. Perfect. All right, so I think now you can see slides. Hopefully with the background of the Grand Tetons behind them, where I hope to be in the near future. All right, so this is actually coming straight from the Special Educator Academy. I pulled one of the modules from the course that has many, many modules because we break them all up into very small components because nobody wants to sit for long periods of time. So this is our section on managing and figuring out the space. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the text part. I just want to show you some of the pictures. But we do want to make sure that all... Oh, let me ask one more question. Is there an annoying buzzing sound coming from a microphone? Because if there is, let me know and I'll switch mics. I can never hear it, but then I watch the videos and I can hear it and it drives me insane. So if I have a buzzing sound, let me know, or a high-pitched sound. Okay, thank you, Danielle. Perfect. Always tell me if you can't hear me, and if you can't hear me, I'm not quite sure why, but always tell me if you hear weird sounds from my microphone. Okay, so you always want to make sure that when you're putting the room together, you want to make sure that every part of the room is functional for the piece that's taking place in it. So if we're going to have all the students there, we want to make sure that they're not too close together, because we know from research and personal experience that if you put people too close together and you have that overcrowding, you're going to have a lot of behavioral issues. And if you have wide open spaces in your classroom, you have a lot of running, you have a lot of behavioral issues in that way. So you kind of want the Goldilocks of physical space when you're putting things together. You also want to make sure that you're setting up your classes so that you're trying not to have areas distract students from things, which is pretty obvious. You don't want your loud and rowdy sensory area distracting students when they're trying to take a test. But you also want to try to make sure that you can see the whole classroom. Like we used to have many, many moons ago, we used to have those tall cubicle dividers that we used in our classrooms, but they're so tall we can't see over them. And that became an issue because even though we knew somebody was with the students at that point, we still couldn't see as the instructors the whole class. And you really, as the teacher, want to be able to see everything that's going on. So if you look at this is a preschool class, and I've got some different pictures that I want to show you of different ages. This is a preschool class, and one of the things I really like about this particular set of furniture is the fact that you can move it fairly easily. It actually comes on wheels, so you can actually close it up and open it up. And it's low, so it's only about 2 to 3 feet high, so it's easy to see over. But it really helps, in a lot of our regular ed classes, we use these, divisions of floor where the carpet stops. That's enough to tell most kids this is where this area ends. For a lot of our kids, they kind of have to have the furniture. They kind of have to come up against the furniture to know that that's where we're supposed to stop. And kind of I've seen that with adults as we've had to have more boundaries set in the world of COVID. I see that sometimes. But low shelves, I love shelves because they're usually, as long as they're sturdy and they're steady, they make really good dividers. It's hard sometimes to help your administration understand why you need them if you have a lot of built-in storage, because they always think you want them for storage. And it's always like, no, and I need them to divide my room. Like, I get that I have enough storage, but I need furniture. It's kind of like when I show up at a school with 25 clear shoe boxes and they're like, are you going to organize the closet? Like, what are you doing? I need them for independent work. We need a lot of things that don't seem typical. Dividers are really great. I really like sponge dividers that are very sturdy, so they're not going to knock over very easily, but that are low enough that I can see over them. Uh, for some students, tape will work. And it is pretty amazing some of the things you can do with tape. I often will put tape around a student's chair to let them know where their chair needs to stay in a space, because I've had a lot of students in the last few years who will get closer and closer to someone as they're running group activity in their chair. And it's amazing when you just put yellow tape around their chair, suddenly they stay put. And you're not doing that back and forth kind of thing. And sometimes different flooring material will work for some students. You also want to make sure that there's a distinct area for activities. What we want to try to avoid doing, and I'll explain why, is it's really tempting because sometimes there's that feeling that our students are so individualized that, we're just going to kind of have a class where we're just going to kind of do everything, and I'll try to meet the individual needs of the kids all at one time. The hard part with that is that for the students, they don't know when something begins and when something ends. And that makes everything very ambiguous for them. And that means that they don't know what to expect, which can heighten their anxiety. It means that they don't always know what you expect of them. It means that they don't know when something's going to end, which can be very difficult, especially if they're doing something that is difficult or frustrating for them. It's kind of like if somebody said, here, take a math test, and you don't know how to do the math, and, oh no, I don't know when it's going to end. Just keep working until I tell you you're done. It's really hard when there isn't a really clear beginning and end to things. So the more that we can make our physical environment, our schedule that I talked about last week and things like that, predictable for our students, the more that they can spend their energy focused on what they're doing. And the fact is, that's true for our adults as well. The less time that the teacher and the aides and anyone else that's working in the classroom has to spend time thinking about the schedule, the more time they can focus on the people that they're with the students, and what they're doing with the students. So they don't have to worry about what are we doing next? Where do I need to go? What time are we changing? That's why life gets a little bit easier after the first couple of weeks of school when the schedule gets locked in a little bit more consistently, because we get a routine. And once we have a routine, we don't have to think about that as much anymore. We don't have to constantly wonder what's going to happen. And so we want to do the same thing with the classroom. I've been in a lot of classrooms over a number of years where I come in and everybody does everything at one table. And of course, the problem with that is, A, there's no change of scenery for the kids over the course of the day, which is hard. But B, it means that the students don't know when something ends, and they don't know when they're going to move to something new, and they don't know where they're supposed to be. And so we see a lot of behavioral issues for that, and we get a lot of escape-related behavior for that, because the sense is really just, oh, well, I'll just leave this area and I won't have to do this. So we want to build a classroom where specific things are associated with specific activities. I go to this area to do reading. I go to this area to do math. And maybe they're the same area. That's okay. I go to this area to work by myself. I go to this area to work with my teacher. I go to this area to play my games. And so we really want to make sure that we're making it clear to them that in this area, this is what I expect. If I'm working in preschool, for those pre-K guys out there, I go here to play, I go here to work. There's a difference between those two things. And I pull this up because one of the things I think that's hard about setting up a classroom in general is we often will set up a lot of center kinds of areas. We have a tendency to make them all on the outside of the room, leaving a lot of empty space in the middle of the room. And so there's always that hard thing of, what am I going to put in the middle of the room to take up that space? And so in this classroom, in this preschool classroom, we actually used her kitchen furniture to put her kitchen, her play kitchen, in the middle of the space, which was a little different than what we normally do. We normally would put those things where you see preschool written all over the back of those things. We'd normally put those up against a wall, but we really needed something to kind of structure that space. And we had other things that we wanted to be the kids to be less distracted. We didn't really care if they got distracted by things in the middle of the room if they were in the middle of play. So this became kind of the center of her room. And then she had some constructive play and independent work and her direct instruction area and things like that. And so this broke up that center space for her. The shelves that open and close are really nice. If you don't have them, that's fine. If you have a hard time with students who are grabbing things off of shelves, which I think we've all probably had a student like that at one point in our career, if not a million, use curtains. You don't have to have closable shelves. Cover it with a curtain. And by a curtain, if you're like me, I mean a sheet that you put on the shelf with Velcro. Or if you happen to be handy or know someone who's very crafty, actually make curtains. We had a teacher who was, and so everybody got curtains and they were beautiful. But I also really always include this picture for another reason, which is that you see these stars. This is something that I hear people talk about all the time, and people will give people an absolute, you can never hang things from the ceiling if you have a child with autism. This is a school for kids with autism. This is actually a preschool for kids with autism. And when we first walk in, you hear people say, oh, no, you can't have things hanging from the ceiling. This is the only place in the room where they're hanging. It's actually dividing an area. It's actually providing a function in this room. And it never bothered the children. Now, if I had a lot of low-hanging things that are blowing in the air conditioning, that would distract me. So that might be a problem. So there never really is a true black and white. It really depends on your students. You want to be aware of it, that it might be a distraction for a lot of students, not just kids with autism. But you want to make sure that it's not being a problem. So we certainly wanted to look at the class and make sure it wasn't being an issue. But if it wasn't, there's no reason why it shouldn't be, why we can't do that. It looks nice. It had a function in this classroom. It wasn't overwhelming, and it was fine. So don't black and white everything. There are no black and whites in most of special ed. That's what special ed's all about. This is a really good example of thinking about how to set up even something as simple as like your reading table. Think about whether or not you want to have that larger group table, even when you're doing small group, in the middle of the classroom, or if that's going to be that the kids are going to be too distracted by everything else going on in the room. Or if you want to have it in more of a corner like this, and then take the extra step to think about, do you have students who are able to stay in the area, or do you have students who are going to have a hard time staying in the area? The reason for that is, in this particular classroom, the kids were really good about being able to stay in their seats and follow directions. This is actually a resource / self-contained room. So there were some students who were pretty self-contained, and there were some students who just came in for certain kinds of instruction. And so they were able to sit and attend and follow directions, but they were very distracted by everything else going on in the room. And we really did want the teacher to be able to look out over the room. So what you see is the kids are sitting with their back to the room, and the teacher is looking out on the room because the kids could stay there. If we found that the students would not stay in the area, there's probably two things we could do. One would be to put a shelf or some sort of low divider here so that there's a boundary for them, that they know that they need to stay in that area, and that may be enough. Or our other option is to flip the table around so that the students have their backs in the corner with the table in front of them. Now, that means the teacher is going to have her back to the classroom. So you've got to make sure you've got some supervision in another way, or reposition where the teacher is at the table in some way so she's got supervision. So you want to make sure that you've thought that through. But you may be able to deal with it by just moving a shelf so that it is making an area that's behind the table. But you really want to think about how you're using your furniture placement based on the needs of your students as well. You want to make sure that you've got clear boundaries for areas as well. And this is a classroom where you can see, even for a very large circle area or morning meeting area, you can see just tape on the floor that shows the students, when you come, you're going to sit on this circle area, this tape. this is where you sit, because they have a tendency to gang up on the teacher. So just having that tape on the floor is enough for them to know, sit at this distance in a ring. You want to make sure that your traffic is flowing in a way that makes sense. And I will be the first to tell you that I am the person who's most guilty of not doing this. I create a schedule and then my team goes, yeah, this is nice, Chris, but you kids are going like this across the room. And it's crazy. Why can't they just go in a circle? I'm like, because I didn't think about the room when I made the schedule. And then we have to fix the schedule. So, yes, it makes much more sense to go this way than to go this way, back and forth and running into each other and things like that. So you want to make sure that your furniture is moving the kids around the room, that it's telling them which way to go, that it's not blocking their direction. But sometimes you want to be able to block it. Sometimes it's nice to be able to go, okay, we've opened this up and now I'm going to close this up. And you want to have your rotations in a logical order because you want it to be predictable. This is just an elementary classroom that I went in and was working with, and it was just really clear that they were all doing everything pretty much at this table. And so, as was typical, one of the things I did was we had to go find more furniture. So one of the things that's really good is you get to know your team. Find out who on your team is really good at scrounging. I had a really, really good consultant who used to work for me with us that was the epitome of scrounging. She had no compunction about going in people's closet and going, you using this? I'm just going to borrow it. I'll bring it back. I'm just going to take it for a little bit. And she was just one of those people that everybody loved. And so they had no problems with her going through their closets. She did stuff I could never do. And so find out who has that skill. Because it is really useful, because people have teachers hoard, we hide stuff because we don't want to give it up because we know we're not going to see it again. And it is amazing what you will find that people don't want. Wander, if you're a brand new teacher, wander the hallways while the teachers are getting ready before the kids come. It is amazing what you will find that people will get rid of. But it doesn't make sense to do everything at the same table. The kids need to move. They need to interact with more than just one person. They need to interact with the pairs in the class. They need to get instruction from more than one person. Not new instruction, but they need to practice skills with more than just one person. Because particularly if you're working with a classroom that has any students with autism, but also a lot of our special ed kids, they have real problems being able to generalize their skills from one person to another. And you don't want them to become so dependent on one person that when that one person is not there, they can't do what they normally do. So you see in independent work, they're facing the wall. Not because, just because we don't want them looking out and being distracted by everything else going on. We want them focused on the work. Here again, if I have students who are going to run, you can see I've got the kids sitting with their back to the wall. If I've got kids who need to be not paying attention to the rest of the room, I'll turn it around. And of course, you always have to leave the computers where they are and design the room around them. Here, we put the schedules here. This was another mistake I make. Design your room with the door open. Because when you do that, you do not put the schedules behind the door, which is what I do every single time. And then realize that the kids can't get to it because when the kids walk in, the door blocks the schedules. So the schedules needed to be over here so that the door opens and they can get to them. And you don't have to put if you're using visual schedules, you don't have to put all your visual schedules in one place either. So don't feel like you have to have them all on one wall. One of the best classrooms we ever did was a classroom that I thought was horrible when we walked in. It was in a basement, and they had these huge big columns holding up the building essentially. And I was like, what are we going to do with these things? We put their schedules on them. And suddenly, especially if you have kids who go and tear schedules down, they didn't do it anymore because they were only going to their schedule and the other kid's schedule was on the other side of the column. And so suddenly it was like, it was great. Kids had their own schedule places. It worked amazingly well. So there's their independent work systems. So their baskets are going to go here. And they're going to work at this table. This is like a flex space. We had one kid who could actually work pretty independently and go get his work. And they needed a place where related services like speech and OT could come in and see kids. So we used that. Okay, I see a sad face, and I'm not sure why someone is sad. I'm not sure what I said that was a problem. If you tell me, I can address it. So this is the computer. You can see the computer area and our math and reading area. And of course, if you're designing for wheelchairs, you're going to have more open space and fewer dividers. So this is a middle school classroom where you can see the kids are actually sitting at tables, so they don't have their own desks. One has his own desk. And we've got a place for our students with wheelchairs that they can get out of their wheelchair that is more private for themselves. We've got a leisure area with their couch and their computers. And then this has there's a whiteboard here as well. And so you can see there's not as much physical structure in this classroom because we have wheelchairs that have to travel through them. So you've got to take that into account as well. Luckily in this classroom, we didn't need as much physical boundaries either. So that was a good thing. And then as you're thinking about organization, think about the fact that it isn't about everything being perfect, especially not at the beginning of the year. It's about efficiency. It's about setting up what works, getting it going. It's about making it work efficiently. It's about reducing stress, putting things where you need them, and then figuring it out as you go along. Obviously, this is a quote about doing it within your house, but the same thing is true with your classes. When your classroom is organized, is it nice when everything is color-coded and put away and it looks beautiful and you could put it on Instagram and everybody would be jealous? Yes. Is it necessary to make it work that way? No. And in fact, for the majority of the things that you see that are beautiful in those situations, they were that way for 5 minutes. I always laugh because I always pull up pictures like the ones I've shown you. And there's always something wrong with the pictures that I show. And the reason for that is because I'm always in the middle of trying to set up a classroom. And when I'm trying, thank you, Maureen. No problem. I just am like, oh no, what did I say? I can't even remember what I said. When I'm taking pictures, I'm always laughing because usually I go in and in a week we actually get a classroom set up and running in about 3 days. And so we come in with a lot of materials already, so we're not making everything during that time. But when we do it, it's not going to be beautiful when you do it in 3 days, but it's going to run. And that's what I care about. But then I go and I look at the pictures and I'm like, okay, I know I'm taking pictures for presentations, but they're never going to be pretty. Plus a lot of my pictures are really old, but and I'm always like, why aren't my pictures nicer? And part of it is just because I really, really want to be the color binder girl. I really, really want to be the person that has everything in really nice color binders. Unfortunately, I appear to be the person who has all the color binders, but never actually puts the stuff in them. The stuff is still in piles on my desk. I have the color binders. I have labels on them, but the stuff never actually gets into them. I'm a macro organizer. So organization isn't about perfection. It's about making sure that you have what you need where you need it. So think about that as you organize your classroom. Think about where you need to put the stuff so that it's where you need it when you need it. And I think that's a real key element as you think about the materials and what you need. So I want to thank you, and I want to open it up for questions. If you guys have questions, share questions. There's obviously a lot more than I can say about this. I can teach a whole class on this. I can talk all day on this. Because there's a lot that goes into making up a classroom. It's not an easy task. And we know that. I know it's not an easy task, having done it many, 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 many times. So, and I've got, I will put some links in the post when I get off here, that will take you to, if you're a preschooler, I will take you to a post that has some tours of the Bodwin School on my website, which is a preschool I used to work with at Nova Southeastern. One of the comments that it gets, and I'm just going to tell you this, is, oh, it would be really nice if we had all this great stuff. Don't get hung up on the stuff that they have. We've done the same things in public schools with a lot less. Um, so don't get hung up on that. But Sue does a really nice job of walking you through why things are the way that they are in the 3 tours that she did of those classes. I do have some middle and high schools that I will show you, and I will get the, there is a high school schedule that's up, and I will get the rest of the secondary classroom up. I don't have pictures of that classroom. I do have, that was one of those that we never took. We took the before pictures. We forgot to take the after pictures. But I will link you up to some pictures of other floor plans that are on the web, so you can have a look at those as well. And if you're looking for more help, definitely come to Special Educator Academy. We're in the middle of our study group. We just finished doing designing classrooms, and so we're meeting on Sunday nights. We've got one more night, but the course is there the whole time, and we're always there to support you in everything you do. So, all right. Thank you so much for everything that you guys do. I know it is a lot. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully this year being back to a more typical year. All right. How do you suggest that you deal with student elopement? It's going to depend on why they're eloping more than anything else. The question I think you always want to ask with any kind of challenging behavior is, why is the behavior happening? Is the behavior to get you to chase them and get attention? Is it to escape from the situation? Is it a combination of those things? So I think the first thing you have to do is figure out why the behavior is happening. And then I think you have to figure out, how can we get that need met in a more appropriate way? And I think you have to figure out how he or she can get that need met, because it is so powerful, in a way that, and get it met in a way that gets as big a reaction or as big an outcome as the elopement does. So for instance, if it's getting a big reaction because people have to chase him, and you can't not chase him, you can't not just go, oh, okay, yeah, he's going to run out, we're just going to ignore him. That you can't do. Then I would say, you're going to have to find a way to really play up and give a big reaction for more appropriate behaviors. You're going to have to find a way to meet that need at a level that's as reliable, so gets the student that reinforcement as readily and as easily as the behavior did, and get the reinforcer as quickly and as consistently. So those are really the things that you want to look at. Why is the behavior happening? What could they do instead that will get that outcome as quickly, as easily, and as consistently as that behavior does? And then you really want to practice and teach that behavior. Lessen as much reinforcement as you can to the negative behavior. Do preventive things to try to prevent it from happening as much as possible, and teach up the replacement behavior. I know that's a lot to do in a very short answer, but that's really the question, the crux of the issue is why. Do you think the students should have their own designated desk or table, or move throughout the room based on activity? I would say probably in most classes, depending on their space, it depends in part on the classroom. As students get older into late elementary, I start really looking at having their own desk or table, or at least having their own space, unless I have a really teeny tiny room. Or unless they have that in a general ed room, they may not need it in a special ed room. As students get older and I start seeing them have that space more in a regular ed classroom, their own age peers, I start really looking for how I can do that in a special ed class. So then I do start really looking at them having that in the special ed room. But I don't think that they have to do all their work at that place. So I think, and I didn't pull it for this, but I have set up classrooms where they have their own desk, but they still travel to centers for some of their activities. And then they have like a home base where maybe that's where their schedule rests. That's where their materials go. That's where they come back to check their schedule is on their desk. And maybe we've even done it where we do our whole group activity is actually the kids sitting in their desk when they're in like fifth and sixth grade, and then in junior high. Our whole group activity is kids sitting in desks because that's what whole group looks like at that age for the other kids. And then when we go to independent work, they do that at a station. When we do direct instruction, either the teacher comes to their desk or they go to another place. So they still travel, but they might still have their own desk if I have the space. If we don't have the space, we fudge a little bit with it. It just depends on the class. I hope that helps. Other thoughts? All right, guys, I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so much. If you're watching the recording, feel free to drop a comment, tag me, and I will be happy to come back and answer. And I will be back next week at 3:30 on Thursday to talk about working with the staff in the classroom. So hopefully I will see you then. Bye, guys.